Masechet Yevamot Daf Kof Tet. We begin with the new Mishnah that reads Hamgaresh et ha'isha v'chazira muteret layavam v'Rabbi Azar oser. Someone divorces his wife and then they remarry, which is permitted. She was not with anybody else in between. But then he dies without children, so she can perform yibum with his brother. Now you might think, well, why not? What would be wrong with this? She's married to a man and he dies. So that seems obvious. So the question really is why does it be El Azad say it's prohibited? So the reason is because at the time that she was married and then divorced, during that period between the divorce and before she got remarried, she is her husband's divorcee, and at that point she would be prohibited. If the husband would die, her ex-husband would die without children at that point, she would not be able to perform yibum because she is forever prohibited to her brother-in-law. Brother-in-law is prohibited even after divorce. So the Bial Azad considers as follows. Since they got divorced, at that point that they get divorced, then that's it. They are no longer, she can no longer be with him. And that breaks the possibility of yibum. So according to the Bial Azad, when we consider doing whether yibum is permitted or not, what we're considering is that from the time they first get married with the first marriage, there is always a potential to do yibum. And so that potential to perform yibum, if he would die without children, continues. Even though she couldn't marry him now that she's married, that they're married, but if he dies, then they could do it. But as soon as he dies, he could do yibum. But once they get divorced, then that solidifies, that ends the potential yibum. And even when they get married again, according to the Bial Azad, no, that's it. Yibum does not restart. Whereas, according to Tanna Kama, it says, I don't care what the history was. I just go by the time of death. At the time of death, they were married. The brother's available and he can do yibum, so then permit it. And I don't really care that in between there was a space of time during which she was the husband's divorcee and therefore there was no yibum then. It doesn't matter. The potential of doing yibum does not have to carry through straightforward. Okay, so that seems to be the reason, although the Gemara itself is going to bring 4 different explanations for to be El Azar. That's case number 1. Now this is the same case as one before, except not with an adult girl, but rather a minor girl whose father had died. A minor girl's father had died. She can only be married off by her mother or older brother, and that is a derabanan. The rabbis did that to protect her, so she would not be mistreated by men. She would have a protector. Okay, in that case, that marriage is only a derabanan marriage. So if they have a derabanan marriage, and then he divorces her, and then they get remarried. So when they get remarried, it's a second derabanan marriage. In that case, it's the same as the first. And according to Tanna Kama, no problem. At the time of death, doesn't matter that there was a divorce in between. At the time of death, it was permitted. So therefore, you can do yibum. And the Bial Azar says no good, since there was in between. There was a time when they were divorced, and at that time of divorce, if he had died, you would not be able to do yibum. So the potential of yibum has to carry through from the first marriage all the way through to the time he dies, and there's an interruption. So then the Bial Azar says the same thing is no good. Okay, so case 1 was all deoraita, 2 deoraita marriages, because they're adults. So deoraita marriage 1, divorce. Deoraita marriage 2, good. Second case is 2 drabanan marriages. The third case is going to be the more interesting one. Ketana she'si'a abiha v'nit karsha ki toma b'chayeha av v'chazira divra hakol asura leyavam. If at first she is a minor and the father married her off. Oh, now if she's a minor and the father is alive, so she is not a yetoma, right? She has parents. Yetoma here means she has a father. And the father is authorized biblically to marry her off. So that first marriage is a deoraita marriage. Then the guy divorces her. Okay, so now at this point she is like an orphan in her father's lifetime. The father only gets one chance to marry off his daughter on the deoraita level. If the guy divorces her, then any future marriage, even if the father is involved, is a derabanan level. So if she goes back to that first husband, that second marriage is only a derabanan marriage. So in that case, even Tanakama agrees with Rabbi Elazar that she cannot go back. What is the reason? The reason is as follows. After the second marriage, when he dies, that marriage was only derabanan. So therefore, the obligation to do yibum is only a derabanan obligation. However, the prohibition of edva, being with a brother-in-law, is a deoraita prohibition from the first marriage, right? As soon as she married the first time, she was prohibited on the deoraita level to her husband's brother. That's same as every marriage. Its only exception is yibum if he dies without children. So fine, that exception will carry as long as they're married biblically. Once they divorce biblically, so now she is forever prohibited to him, to the brother, and if the husband would die at that time, that would be edva, no good. Now the only way to possibly undo that would be if they marry again on a doraita level. Okay, then according to Tanakama, fine, we can go by the time of death. But here, on a biblical level, they are not married again. She's still his divorcee. So therefore, even Tanakama would say, no, you cannot do yibum in this case of Doraita and then Derabanan. Okay, fascinating Mishnah. Okay, now we're going to explain Tanakama in 4 ways. Number 1, Amar Aefa, Maita Amad Rabbi Elazar Ho'il ve'amda alav sha'achat bi'isura. The reason of Rabbi Elazar why it's prohibited is because there was a time period, even if it was a short time period, when she was prohibited to the Yavam, after divorce. After that divorce, even if the first husband would die, the second after the divorce, there's no yibum, because a yibum only works when they are married at the time of death. And since at that point, even if he would die, she is prohibited to the Yavam, so that's it. There is one moment of prohibition, therefore, the potential for yibum does not carry through all the way, and she is forever prohibited. Okay, good. That makes sense. Except, Amru le Rabbanan leifa, ihachi chalisa name la tibae. If you're really consistent in this, and you think that the Yavam and the Yavama are prohibited as brothers-in-law, as brother-sister-in-law, isur adva, then you should not even require halisa, because any case where the Yavam and the Yavama are related, are prohibited as edva, like if it was his daughter, then you do yibum, and you don't even need to do chalisa. So you're saying here that we don't count any exception for yibum, because we don't go by the time of death, but rather we go all the way back to the time that they were first married, and therefore there's no exception for yibum. If there's no exception for yibum, then their brother or sister-in-law, that's edva. So you shouldn't require chalitza. And they'll be say, yes, indeed, according to Rabbi Elazar, no need for chalisa. V'atanya mishum Rabbi Elazar amru chales b'raita. That says yes, you still have to do chalisa. So that doesn't work. Ela amar Ifa Rabbi Elazar le'yadana may ta'ama. Actually, Ifa said, I don't know the reason for Rabbi Elazar. This is an important challenge. Okay, so that was reason number 1. Didn't work. Abaye is just going to tweak it a little and make it work. Amar Abaye, haynu tamad Rabbi Elazar, mesapeka le'i mitama pelet inisuin harishonim apiliin. It's really the same as what Ifa said, except that Rabbi Elazar was simply not sure if this was the case or not. Rabbi Elazar was in doubt whether we follow the time of death, and that's when she falls to the Yavam, and we can ignore what happened beforehand. It doesn't matter that she was divorced beforehand. At this moment, they are married, and then he died, and so she can do yibum. Is that true? Which is what Tanakama says. Or maybe it's the first wedding, it's the first marriage. That's what makes her a potential Yevama. At any moment, he may die. And then you would have to do yibum. Since it's that the first moment that they're married, that the potential starts glowing, but then that glow goes out once they do have a get. And so that interrupts it. So now you cannot do yibum ever after. So he's not sure. In that case, indeed, it would be so that you wouldn't need chalisa. But he's not sure. So imitama pelta ramya kamel yibum. If in fact we follow the first opinion, then she is presented for Yibum. And that's Tanakama who says, yes, you can do Yibum. But if we follow the second reasoning, that we have to be from potential Yevama the entire way through, then, wait, there was an interruption in it, and therefore, no, you can't do Yibum. According to this, you wouldn't need Chalisa either, but we're not sure. Maybe it's the first one, so therefore you have to do Chalisa misafek. That's Abaye's answer. Third answer, Rava Amar, Leolam Peshita Rabbi Elazar Demitama Pelet. In fact, Rabbi Elazar agrees with Tanakama. Everyone says that it's the time of death that depends. That determines, and it doesn't really matter that there was an interruption beforehand. But rather, the problem is on the Rabbanan level. Everybody hears when someone gets divorced. It's a very gossipy thing, right? Did you hear who got divorced? So they know that the person got divorced, and then therefore, if the guy dies and she goes and marries someone else, everybody will say, well, of course they didn't need yibum or chalitza because they were divorced. But not everyone's going to hear when they get married the second time, right? Second marriage, you don't invite so many people. It's not as juicy gossip that they got married again the second time. And so therefore, people are going to assume, they're going to remember, oh yeah, they got divorced. And then all of a sudden, they're going to see the guy died and she married the brother, and they're going to make a mistake to think that, oh, I guess Yibum can be done even after divorce. And so that's the problem. It looks too much like Yibum after divorce, because in the eyes of people who just will not hear that they in fact got remarried. Now we ask, Adraba, Hazara, itle kala. Hold on, remarrying, since they're living together, so that actually does have a lot of publicity. People are eventually going to see them, right, going home together, being together, and most people lived in small villages, and so that in fact is interesting that they got back together. And look, they're living together. How could they live together? Did they get divorced? Oh, they got remarried. So actually people will know about that, so why do you have to worry? And the answer is, Milaskina dehadra beorta ushri besafra. Says, well, it could very well be that they got married in the evening, and maybe he died the very next morning. Sounds suspicious. Okay, but the point is the Mishnah don't talk about any case. And since it is possible that in some cases he may die soon after the wedding, before there is enough time for the word to get out that they were remarried, so we go back to once again to the fact that people hear about divorces, but they don't hear as quickly about second marriages. And therefore, people will get confused and think that you can do Yibum even after divorce, even without marriage. So that's just too confusing. That's the third answer. Rav Ashi Amad Hainu Ta'amad Rabbi Elazar. Fourth answer of Rav Ashi, explaining Rabbi Elazar de Gazad Hane Mishum Yetoma Bechaye Ha'av Behechezira. He explains that the first two cases of the Mishnah are prohibited only midrabanan because they look too much like the third case. The third case is where she is married by her father as a minor. That's a biblical marriage, but then divorced. And at that point, she is prohibited biblically to be with any of her husband's relatives, including his brother. And then she gets remarried on her own, but that's only rabbinic. So the rabbinic level is not strong enough to undo the biblical. So at a biblical level, she is still prohibited to him. So that's why the third case is biblically prohibited, and everyone agrees to that, even Tanakama. But they're confusing. How are you going to keep track? Adult is okay. A minor is okay. But minor with the father's alive, and then gets married again as a minor, right? You see how confusing it is? We're confused ourselves. So therefore, you know what? Make a gezerah for all cases should be prohibited. The first two cases are prohibited because of the third. And you know what? We're going to confirm Rav Ashi makes the most sense. Because the end of the Mishnah says, Ketana shesi'a abihav nitkarsha kitoma bechaye ha'av vehechezira tibra kol shasura leyavam. We're simply quoting the Mishnah, the third case, that when the father married her off when she was young and then she got divorced, she is like an orphan in her father's while her father is alive, in the sense that when she gets remarried, that remarriage is only d'Rabbanan, and therefore, on a biblical level, she cannot do Yibum because, on the biblical level, she is not remarried, so she can't go back or go and be with her brother-in-law after divorce. So we ask, Mishnah. Why would the Mishnah even talk about the third case? Even isn't the third case obvious? It's just an obvious application of principles, nothing to it. Rather, why is the Mishnah bringing that third case at all? It must be it's bringing it as an explanation for Rabbi Elazar's opinion in the first two cases. Why in the first two cases is it prohibited? Because it looks very much like the third. Okay, so that would be from the very structure of the Mishnah, because the third case otherwise would not be needed. Tanya Kevated Rav Asher, not only the Mishnah, but also a Baraita supports Rav Asher's last opinion. That's a Gezerah, the third case, to the first two cases to the third case. The Baraita reads, Modim Chachamim l'Rabbi Elazar b'ktana shesi'ah aviha v'nitkadesha harei kitoma b'chaye ha'av v'chazira she'asur le'yavam mipnei she'gerusheha gerushin gemurin ve'en hazarata hazara gemura. So here says the sages agree with Rabbi Elazar in this third case, where as a child her father married her off and then she got divorced, and now at this point she is like an orphan even though the father is alive. If she gets remarried again, she is prohibited to the brother-in-law because her get is full biblical get, so she's totally severed, she's from her, but the return is only a d'Rabbanan marriage, the second one. Okay, Baraita continues, shegersha kishehi ketana vechazira kishi ketana aval gersha kishi ketana vechazira kishi gedola iname hechazira kishi ketana begadla etzlo vamet o choleset o mitjabemet. When is this true that it would be prohibited? Only if she was divorced as a minor, and she married while she is a minor, and the husband died at that point. Right, so then there's a problem. But if she got divorced while she was a minor, and then she waited until she was an adult, and then went back and remarried her husband as an adult, in that case, both marriages are biblical. Second one is she's an adult. So that's the same as the first case. And Tanakama would say it's fine. Or even if she got remarried while she was a minor, so at that point it's rabbinic. But enough time elapsed and she became an adult. Vegadla, at the time that she becomes an adult, then her rabbinic marriage turns into a biblical marriage. While they're together, as long as he dies after that, then they are biblically married, and in that case you can do chalitza or do yibum, because it's the same as the first case in the Mishnah, two biblical marriages. That's Tanakama. Bishum Rabbi Elazar amru choleset velo mitjabemet. According to Rabbi Elazar, in these two cases here, you have to do chalitza and you cannot do yibum. He disagrees. So you see, this Baraita has a slightly different structure than the Mishnah. It brings the third case first, and then it brings a variation of the third case where, yes, the father married off as a minor, which is biblical, but then the second marriage is when she's an adult, which is biblical. So for Tanakama, that's totally different. Biblical, it's fine. Rabbi Elazar then says, no good. He doesn't give a reason, but the implication is that it's because of the first. So because in the Baraita, they bring the third case first as the main one. And here it says, Modim Chachamim l'Rabbi Elazar. So this is the main one that Rabbi Elazar says is prohibited. And the sages say, you know what, you're right. In this case, it's no good. So the implication of the structure is that Rabbi Elazar primarily prohibits this third case. And then the other ones, they say, oh, okay, I'll find this one also. And this case here is equivalent to the first case of the Mishnah. So that seems to be the add-on. Rabbi Elazar is like, I don't want to make any difference between them. It looks very similar to the first. But Chachamim are going to say, no, really the logic only is a problem in this case, which is the third one of the Mishnah. And in this case, it's doraita. So there, in these cases, no, there's no reason to prohibit. All right, and now last point about this Mishnah. Sarata mahu. What about a co-wife? So you have this man. He's married to someone who's not related. Okay, now he marries another woman, and divorces her and remarries her. So according to the Be'er Lazar, he cannot, and she dies without children. So now the wife who he married, divorced, and remarried cannot do yibum. You have to do chalitza. We understand that. But what about the co-wife? Can she do yibum? What will be wrong with that? Amarle, that's a question to Rav Nachman. So he answers, Amarle, higufa gezerah. Vana nakum minigzod gezerah ligzerah. So he says, of course, it should be fine totally. After all, according to the last opinion we just said, that of Rav Asher, the whole reason why the woman who married, divorced, and then remarried is only a gezerah because it looks like a case of someone who's a minor and whose father marries her off, and the first is the Doraita and this is the Rabbanan. That itself is a gezerah. But so we don't have to worry about the co-wife. That would be a gezerah to another gezerah, so there's no problem. The co-wife can do yibum. So hold on. We have a Baraita where the Be'er Lazar says she and her co-wife both have to do chalitza. So you see that she cannot do yibum. Now over there we asked, does it mean that she and the co-wife has to do chalitza? We know the rule. Only if the man is married to many wives and he dies, only one of them needs to perform chalitza, and the other co-wives can go free and marry. They don't all have to do chalitza. So rather, we rewrite the Baraita. What it must mean is she or one of the co-wives don't do chalitza. Okay, so now we point out, didn't you have to amend the language of the Baraita anyway? So while you're amending it, you may as well amend it further as follows. Teres hachi hi choleset. Sarata o choleset o mijabemet. She, the wife who married and got divorced and remarried, according to the Be'er Lazar, has to do chalitza for sure. Now the co-wife, that she can decide. She can do chalitza or yibum. So yes, in fact, you can marry the co-wife if he can marry the co-wife if the yavam can do yibum with the co-wife if he wants, and that would be solve all the problems, or do chalitza with either one, and then the other one could go free. Now we have the next Mishnah, which is similar in structure to the previous Mishnah in that it compares biblical and rabbinic obligations and prohibitions. So it's talking about a case that we've seen before of two brothers married to two sisters. So we can call one of them couple A and couple B. And so we have a case, let's say everyone's adults. Mishnah is not going to deal with this case. It's a simple case. If everyone's an adult, and let's say husband A dies without children, so husband B is now going to be the Yavam because they're brothers. Now the problem is he can't do Yibum because the Yevamot is his wife's sister, and that's Erva. There's no way. Since he can't do Yibum, no Chalitza either, and she can simply go free. So that would be a simple case where both marriages are deoraita if they're adults. Mishnah deals with what happens if both or one are a minor. Shnei achim nisuim l'shtei achayot ketanot. Umet ba'ala shel achat mehen halezu teseh mishum achot isha. Two men, brothers, married to two sisters who are both minors, so their marriages, minor orphans whose mother married them off. So their marriages are both mid-rabbanan. And when one of them dies without children, so then you have an obligation to do yibum d'Rabbanan. So it's the same as if they're both deoraita, since on the d'Rabbanan level, this is his wife's sister, so then you cannot do yibum on the d'Rabbanan obligation of yibum for her, for the Yevamah, who is the Yevamah d'Rabbanan. So that's therefore the same law, she can simply go free. And also if they're adults, but they are deaf. Since deaf in those days was not educated, not mentally capable of entering into a full marriage, it's the same as a d'Rabbanan status marriage. Gedola uktana, met ba'ala shel ketana, teseh ketana mishum achot isha. Okay, so now you have back to two sisters, one is an adult and one is a minor. So let's say husband A is the adult, is married to the adult, and husband B is married to the minor sister. And which one dies? Well, it depends. If it's the husband B, the one that's married to the minor dies, well then she can go free, because that would be achot isha. For husband A is married to the adult. That's a full biblical marriage, and therefore the Yevamah is his wife, full wife, 100% biblical wife's sister. Sister is also 100%. And so therefore is completely prohibited on a biblical level. They were only married in the first place. Couple B was only married d'Rabbanan. So the obligation to do Yibum is only d'Rabbanan. And the prohibition of sister-in-law is deoraita. So for sure in this case goes free. But the other way is more complicated. Met ba'ala shel gedola. I'll say husband A was married to the adult, and he's the one that dies. And so now you have husband B who's married only midrabanan to a minor. So he's married to a minor midrabanan, but he has an obligation on a biblical level to his brother to do yibum. So now is this minor drabanan marriage going to prevent him from doing yibum? Rabbi Eliezer Omer melamedin et ketana shetama'en bo. So this is a problem, and we're going to have a couple of solutions. Rabbi Eliezer says, let the minor, the sister, refuse. She's still a minor, so she can refuse, undo the marriage, and that in that case, the Yavam was never related to the Yevamah, because they were never married. He was never married to the sister, and therefore he can do yibum. It's unfortunate that they have to break up that nice couple. Maybe they liked each other, but that's the way it is. You have to fulfill the Doraita obligation, overrides the Rabbanan. Rabban Gamliel Omer im be'ana me'ana. Rabban Gamliel says, yes, you could do that at Eliezer if that's what they want to do, fine, but you don't have to. V'im lav tamtin ad she'tagdil ve'teseh lezu mishum achot isha. Time heals all wounds. All you have to do is wait, and eventually this minor will grow up. As soon as she grows up, passes 12 years old, immediately, sounds like immediately, we'll discuss, maybe do you need a bi'ah after that to consummate the marriage or not? But then, whatever the case is, when she grows up, then that marriage will be deoraita. Once that kicks in, so the second marriage is deoraita. The Yavam is biblically married to one of the sisters, and therefore he is biblically prohibited to his wife's sister, who is the Yavamah, and therefore, since it's impossible, she goes free. But you just have to wait, however many years it is, wait, and then she will be able to go free. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, oy lo al ishto, oy lo al eshet achiv, mosit ishto beget, veshet achiv b'chalisa. Rabbi Yoshua does not like either of those possible ways out, and he says, woe to his wife and woe to his brother's wife. In other words, he has to separate from both of them. He has to give his wife a get, the minor wife, give her a get, because he has a zikah. And since he has a zikah, a biblical level zikah to the Yevamah, he cannot go ahead and marry the sister. And the sister is only the Rabbanan, so on a biblical level, he cannot go ahead to the next stage of marriage with the sister, so he has to give her a get. And on the other hand, he is rabbinically married to this minor sister, and therefore he can't do yibum, so he has to give her chalisa. And so, woe to them, they were all happy, they had two brothers, and now they cannot be married to, one died, but neither can be married to their remaining brother. Okay, so that is the Mishnah, and the Gemara asks, Umi Shareh, Rabbi Eliezer is the one that said, you know what, teacher, tell her, do mi'un, and then that you get rid of that second marriage, and then the Yavam can go and take the Yavamah. Is it permitted to tell someone to go and refuse a marriage? Okay, we'll have a little agada now. Bar Kapara said you should always cling to three things and keep far away from another three things. You should always follow chalisa over yibum. The Gemara will elaborate each one of these. And you should always bring peace among people, and you should always undo a vow. Don't make vows in the first place. If you do, undo the vow. Better to undo the vow than even fulfill it, as we will explain. And keep away from three things. So mi'un, keep far from refusal. Don't tell a minor to go and refuse a marriage. And if she does want to refuse, try to tell her to stay in it. I will say why. But here's the question. Right? How could it be able to say do mi'un? Also, keep away from taking deposits from other people that you're going to watch for them, and keep away from being a guarantor on loans for others. All right. So, what about the mi'un? How could it be able to say do mi'un if Bar Kapara said you should keep far from refusals? Mi'un de misvah shaneh. In this case, it's different. She's not doing mi'un because she's not sure if she likes the guy or not. She's doing mi'un so that her current husband can separate from her and go ahead and do yibum, which is a mitzvah. So in that case, it's okay. All right, kufa, taneh bar kapara. Bar kapara, you said some interesting things. Let's analyze them. No, let me back adam shlosha devrim b'chalisa. Ki abba sheol detanya abba sheol omer. HaKoneset yibim tol l'shem noi, l'shem ishut, l'shem davar acher. Kilu pogea ba'erva v'karov be'ainai liot havalad mamzer. Abba Shaul famously says that we should always do chalitza. And over Yibum, because he said anyone who takes his Yevamah, marries her because she's beautiful, because he wants to be with her, because of some other thing, for example, she's rich, he has some ulterior motive that he wants to be with this sister-in-law, other than purely the mitzvah of helping out to continue the name of his brother. All these things for any personal motivation, it is similar to arayot, because it is, after all, his sister-in-law. And so the very fine line between doing it just for mitzvah and doing it for any other motive, in which case it would be a prohibition of erva. And it's so bad, it's similar, it's close to being having a child who's a mamzer. If it is in fact erva, any child from erva is a mamzer. So Abba Shaul is very strong about doing chalitza over yibum. And Bar Kapara is following him. Bringing peace is always good. Pasuk says you should always seek peace and pursue it. And furthermore, furthermore, it's not just a nice thing that you should run after, but it's actually a mitzvah, because look at this mitzvah. Look at this pasuk. Here it says rodfehu. Another pasuk says run after tzedakah and chesed, and then you'll find life and tzedakah and chavod. So just like pursuing tzedakah and chesed, that is certainly a mitzvah, and those are things that you should run after. So too, shalom is not simply a nice thing, but it's a commandment to run after peace. And now, haftarat nedarim kedid binatan daten binatan damer hanoder keilu bana bama v'mekayemo keilu hikriv alei korban. Someone who makes a vow, it's like he built an altar, a personal altar outside the Bet HaMikdash, which is prohibited. And even if you fulfill the mitzvah, in a way, it's even worse. If you fulfill the vow, it's even worse. It's like you actually made a sacrifice on the altar, which is a double sin. So that doesn't mean that it's better to make a vow and not fulfill it, but the point is, don't make a vow in the first place. Why is it similar to building a personal bama and making a sacrifice? The point is that the mitzvah, the Torah gives you many prohibitions already. You already have lots of lo ta'aseh aseh. Focus on those only. If you're going to go and add more restrictions outside of the Torah, that's like you're doing another form of worship. You have the Bet HaMikdash, that's the established one. And now you're going to say, I'm going to make another sacrifice, my own. Even if you fulfill the vow, so in which case it's not a false vow, okay, fine, but you're still adding more to the Torah that was not commanded. So focus on what you're commanded in and not other things. Based on this reasoning, could be if one makes a vow in order to help him uphold one of the Torah laws. For example, perhaps that would not be like a foreign worship. This may be focused more on ascetic practices that are associated with other religions, and so that's why it's treated so harshly. V'yitzrachek could explain why we do hatarat nedarim so many times, right? Just don't make vows, and if you make vows, undo them. Yitzrachek mishelosha devarim min hame'unin dilma gadla umichareta ba. Bar Kapara also said, stay away from three things. Stay away from mi'un. Don't let a minor girl make a refusal, because she may grow up and then regret, why did I refuse it? As she's still a minor after all. So she got into it, and she may think the grass is greener, I'll find someone better, whatever, and then she may very well grow up and say, why did I refuse that guy? He was perfectly fine. And so it's more likely that she'll be happy though as she is. After all, it's her mother. I'm sure her mother picked someone good for her. Okay, mina pikdonot bebar mata de bete ki bete dame. Don't take deposits from people. Hey, can you watch this for me? Because now you're taking responsibility for this item. And this is talking about in the same city, right? The person lives, if they live in a different city from you and they're traveling, hey, can you hold on to this? I'm going there, I'm coming back. That's one thing because they don't have anywhere to put it. But if the person lives in the same city, then it's going to be just as safe in that person's house than it is in your house. And now you're just taking upon yourself responsibility without any benefit. So don't take upon yourself more liability. And don't be a guarantor. On the one hand, it's not nice to be a guarantor because then you're helping a person get a loan. But we're talking about specifically about this shel tziyon guarantor, where the borrower comes and collects. The lender will collect money directly from the guarantor first, even before the borrower. So in that case, if you're the guarantor, you're really on the line, and you're going to have to pay, and then you're going to have the responsibility of going and running after the borrower to make up the money. And so that's just taking upon yourself too much liability, and try to stay away from that. Pasuk says, he who serves as a guarantor for a stranger will suffer evil in the end. But the Pasuk goes on and says, he who hates those who shake hands is secure. The full Pasuk in Hebrew we're going to need, so here it is. Yeroa ki ara arav zar v'soneh tokaim bo teach. He who spurns pledging shall be secure. Okay, so we're going to explain each part of this. Ra'a achar ra'a. So the ra yeroa is referring to double evil. Evil upon evil will come to those who accept converts. The converts is the word zar. So this is a negative statement about accepting converts. Ul arveh shel tziyon. So the arav is talking about taking upon yourself as being a guarantor. This type of guarantor of shel tziyon, where the guarantor pays directly. Ul tokeya atzmo, this is the rest of the pasuk that says tokeya, someone who confounds himself in matters of halacha, connects himself in some way of matters of halacha. Gemara will explain what this means. Okay, mekable gerim. Kashim gerim Yisrael kasapachat ba'or. It's a negative statement about accepting converts. Follows Rabbi Chelbo, who says that converts are as bad for the Jewish people like sara'at, legions on skin. So if imagining the body, the Jewish people as a body, and then a convert clinging onto it like a disease that will spread. Okay, there are many positive statements about converts, and we saw many of them, but there are also negative statements about converts. So why so negative? The idea is that if the convert is not sincere and is could be a bad influence on others who within the Jewish community, and so in that sense is like a disease on skin. But good converts are good. So arveh shel tziyon davdeh shelof dos. What is this guarantor of shel tziyon? They do this pull out, thrust in. In other words, they pull out the borrower and put the guarantor in his place. So the borrower doesn't have to pay directly. The guarantor has to pay instead. Don't put yourself in that position to have to pay first, and then you have to run after the borrower. Tokei asmoli dvar halacha. What does that mean? Detanya Rabbi Yosef omer kol omer en lo Torah. En lo Torah. Someone who says, I have no Torah. Well, then he has no Torah. Now we ask, Peshita, what does he mean? It's a tautology. Ela komer en lo ela Torah. En lo ela Torah. Someone who says, I want nothing but Torah. Well, then he will have nothing but Torah. Okay, that also doesn't really teach anything. Haname Peshita. Ela dafilu Torah en lo. What we mean is that someone who says, I want to have only Torah, he will not even have Torah. In other words, if he says, I'm only learning Torah, I don't want anything else, I'm not going to practice good deeds, I'm not going to do anything, I'm only going to learn it, then not only does he not have any mitzvot, he also, his Torah does not count as anything. The Pasuk says, learn them, and perform them. The purpose of learning them is to perform them. Kol sheyeshno ba'asiyah yeshno belimida. Kol she'eno ba'asiyah eno belimida. Anyone who does them, then you get credit for also learning them. But if you don't practice them, then your learning them is worthless. So go hand in hand. The Torah study and the action that follows from it, the action will then justify the learning, and then both are worthy, and one gets credit for both. But the study by itself, without practicing them, then the study itself is not even valuable. Or a second understanding of the olam. Maybe like we said originally, someone who said he has nothing other than Torah. Kol omer en lo ela Torah, en lo ela Torah. La sericha dekam magmar lachrine v'azli abdeh. Someone says, I'm only going to learn Torah, I'm not going to do anything. Maybe in fact that is the person we're talking about. And we're talking about someone who says, I will study Torah, I will teach others, and they will perform it. I'm not going to perform any mitzvot, but I'll teach others and they will perform it. So you might have thought, maybe there would be reward for him because he's teaching others and the others are practicing. So that's good enough. So it's Torah study that leads to practice, even though not his own. Kamash malan, and so that's what he means. No, if you say, I'm only going to have the Torah, then and nothing else, then he doesn't even get the Torah unless he himself also practices. The third interpretation, someone who attaches himself to a matter of halacha or confounds himself in the matter of halacha refers to a judge where a case comes before him. And regarding this case, he learned the halacha that's similar to the case that's before him. And he says, you know what, this case is similar to the one I learned. And so he rules based on his own judgment, even though he has a teacher that's near him, and he doesn't go and ask the teacher. Instead, he's relying on his own leap of judgment. That's what it's talking about, that he attaches himself to a davar halacha instead of going directly to his teacher. This judge shows he's not so worried about coming to a wrong decision. If he was really, really worried, if your life depended on it, would you say, case A is similar to case B, or would you go ask the expert first? Right? If it was a sword on your neck, here some versions have on your neck. Here it says placed between your thighs, so that if you go a little to the right or a little to the left, then the sword will cut you. And Gehinam is open below him like a trap door. He makes any mistake, and that's it. That the bed of Shlomo had people surrounding it and protecting it all around. 60 men, mighty men of Israel, all handling it. So because of the dread of the night doesn't mean literally night, but rather from Gehinam, which is similar to the night. And so, therefore, a person who is like Shlomo, who is judging, should always be that afraid. And if you're that afraid, then you're not going to rely on your own judgment comparing one thing to the other, but rather you're going to go and ask and double check to make sure that you are correct. All right, that's the end of the Agadah that we only came to because we had a question about, wait a second, can you tell someone to do mi'un? All right, and now we get to the Rabban Gamliel Omer im me'ana. He says, yes, you if you did that, fine. If you told her to refuse, but actually all you need to do is wait till the minor grows up, and as soon as she grows up, then that becomes a biblical marriage. And once it's a biblical marriage, then the Yavam will be prohibited to the Yavamah because it'll be his wife's sister, biblically. And then that way she can go free. Ba'amineh Rabbi Elazar Merav. My Tamad Rabban Gamliel. Bishum de Kasabar Kiddushe Ketana Mitla Telu. Vechi Gadla Behada. Afagav de Lo Baal. So Rabbi Elazar asks Rav, what exactly is the reasoning of Rabban Gamliel? Is it, here's reasoning A, because Rabban Gamliel thinks that when a minor does Kiddushin, it's held in suspension. And when she grows up, and in that state, she becomes a full right when she grows up. Then so too the kiddushin becomes a biblical kiddushin, and even if they don't consummate with bi'ah, just automatically on her birthday or whenever she sees signs that she is now a gedolah, so it immediately turns from a d'Rabbanan to a deoraita marriage, even without bia. Is that the reason? Or dilma mishum de kasabra mekadesh achot Yevama niftera Yevama v'halcha la ba'al in ila ba'al la. Or maybe he thinks anyone who does kiddushin with the sister of a Yevama. In other words, they have a Yavam and Yevama, and they're not married. The Yavam is not married to the sister yet, and so he has an obligation. He has a zikah, and if he should go ahead and instead of doing yibum, instead he goes and does kiddushin with the sister of the Yevama, then the Yevama can leave her. And now, how could that happen? Only if he only if he consummates with bi'ah. If not, then not yet, doesn't work. You have to do bi'ah in order to consummate the marriage with the sister before the other one goes free. So therefore, you can't just wait till the minor grows up. It doesn't become a biblical connection automatically, not until after she becomes an adult. Then you do bi'ah. Then the biblical marriage kicks in. So which is it? אמר לה, היינו טעמה דרבן גמליאל משום דקסה מקדש אחות יבמה, נפטרה יבמה והלכה לה, היא בעל אין, היא לא בעל לה. And the answer, Rav said, the answer is the second one. That's what Rabban Gamliel thinks, that this would be like a general case of a man who does a Yavam, who does Kiddushin with the sister of the Yavama. So in such a case, she goes free. The Yavama can go free, but that's only if they consummated with Biyah, but not otherwise. And so that would be the same as the minor growing up. It's not enough for her just to grow up. They also have to consummate with Biyah. So this was Rav's answer, and it's going to be challenged. Rav says it must be Rav must have been sleeping when he said this, because it's astounding, since it goes against a baraita. Baraita says that someone who does kiddushin with a minor, the kiddushin is in suspension. So my tiluyin lav ki gadla gadle behada afagav de la baal. What do you mean it's in suspension? It sounds like that even when she grows up, that when she grows up, then the betrothal also grows up with her and becomes a biblical one, even though there's no bi'ah, right? The point is of suspension. That's the point of saying it's in suspension, waiting until what? Waiting until she grows up. It's because the other opinion that says you need a bi'ah, basically that bi'ah would be its own new kiddushin, a biblical kiddushin with bi'ah. That's the point. So if you're saying it's in suspension, it means it's waiting only, not for a new bi'ah, but it's simply waiting for it to grow up. So they have a baraita that says the first option above. How could Rav say the second option? Amar l'Ravin bered Rav Nachman hamileta diktana mitla talya v'kaima ibal in ila baal la da'amra hu adif minai v'ana adifna mine. So Ravin explains that in fact the baraita is consistent with what Rav says. You don't have to say he was sleeping, because this matter of a minor is in suspension and remains in suspension. If after she grows up there is bi'ah, then yes, indeed, it will kick in and become a biblical full kiddushin. And if not, then it won't. Because in what way, and then you call it suspended if you have to do a new one? Because she says, he is better than me and I am better than her. Better than him. What does that mean? He is better than me in that he can give me a get unilaterally. But I am better than him because I can do refusal. So you see, since she can do refusal anytime, it's always in suspension because she can break it up. He can break it up. She can break it up. It's double option of refusal. And in that sense, it's always suspended. But it doesn't mean that automatically it will become a biblical kiddushin when she grows up. you're still going to need a bi'ah in order to bring it from the Rabbanan to a Deoraita level. Continue tomorrow with more about this statement of Rav and the machloket he had with Shemuel. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.